Hello everybody, I'm back for another Godzilla review. If it seems like I just did a Godzilla review a couple weeks ago, well, that's right, I did. And if it sounds like I have a cold, I do. Yeah, I got a cold right after Thanksgiving. Yay! Our movie this time is 1975's Terror of Mechagodzilla. Leading up to this point, I admit I've had a little trouble remembering which Mechagodzilla movie came first, because I always thought Terror of Mechagodzilla sounded more like an introductory title for that character than Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Logically, that one would come second, wouldn't it? Like Mothra precedes Mothra vs. Godzilla? But the Japanese title for Terror of Mechagodzilla is Mechagodzilla no Gyakushu. We've heard the word Gyakushu before. The first Godzilla sequel, Godzilla Raids Again, was titled Gojira no Gyakushu. The word Gyakushu can be translated as counterattack, so in Japanese, this is like Mechagodzilla's counterattack, Mechagodzilla's revenge, Mechagodzilla rises again. Any of those titles in English would have made it clear that this is a direct follow-up to the previous movie. But then again, none of those sound quite as intimidating as Terror of Mechagodzilla. Thanks to a discussion with one of you in the comments section of my last Godzilla review, thanks Kaiju Rob, I was forewarned that this movie is quite different from Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. This one is darker and more somber. Granted, you probably won't get a sense of that from the plot summary I'm about to give you. Aliens from the black hole third planet have fished Mechagodzilla debris out of the sea with the intention of rebuilding him. With the assistance of a mad scientist's animal control experiments, the aliens take over a sea-dwelling dinosaur called Titanosaurus, using him and the new and improved Mechagodzilla to wreak havoc on planet Earth, or at least on Japan, and it's up to Godzilla to stop them. This is yet another significant entry in the Godzilla series, with original and longtime kaiju director Ishiro Honda back at the helm for one last time. Here, though, it's Honda following Fukuda instead of the other way around. I was curious to see what different choices Honda might make, specifically in the way Mechagodzilla was shot, or if for continuity's sake he would attempt to mimic Fukuda's distinct style. I was surprised to find that the filming style itself wasn't so different from what Fukuda did in the last movie. I do think that in his last Godzilla film, Fukuda toned things down a bit, but Honda also followed his lead when it came to things like close-ups of Mechagodzilla's weaponry and the design of the alien's hideout and wardrobe. So there wasn't a huge contrast in the filming style, but where the stark difference lies is in the mood and in the human storyline. That's where you can tell that Honda was in charge. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is fun and exciting and a little bit crazy. It's a good time all around. Terror of Mechagodzilla, on the other hand, is heavier and more mature. There's barely any levity, and for the most part the characters are played straight. As he did in other films, Honda generates a feeling of fear by emphasizing not just the monster destruction, but the chaos and fear of the civilians clamoring to evacuate the city before the monster's arrival. This is also one of the few Godzilla movies to have nudity in it, if you're watching the original Japanese version. I guess technically there was nudity in Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, but I just thought that was a mannequin floating in the water, so that doesn't count. This was different, especially when I found out, oh, we're just gonna hold here for like a minute. Okay. Another thing that I think contributes to the serious mood is that this movie was noticeably quiet. Akira Ifukube returned for the first time since 1968 to do the music, and he was relatively light-handed with the score. There is some incidental music here and there, and a few exciting instances of Godzilla's original theme music playing as he appears on screen, but there isn't an overwhelming musical presence, and certainly none of the jaunty jazz of some other Godzilla flicks. What I think really distinguishes this one from some others that have come before, though, is the human element. That's not usually the main feature in these movies. Most viewers are probably tuning in to see giant rubbery monsters beat each other up. If the human characters are forgettable, interchangeable, or underdeveloped, that's okay because the plot is mainly just the means by which the monsters can enter the picture. But with a main character who turns out to be a cyborg, an internal conflict that drifts into Blade Runner-like territory, and an ending that reminded me of a Shakespearean tragedy, I'll argue that this is one of the exceptions. It prompts questions like what defines personhood, what defines humanity, and if those who saved your life strip you of your will and force you to do things you don't want to do, was it worth being rescued in the first place? And I like the pathos of the relationship between Dr. Mifune and his daughter Katsura. This movie was not just a finale for Ishiro Honda. It's also Akihiko Hirata's final Godzilla film, his last of 6 movies, including the original Gogeta, King Kong vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, Son of Godzilla, and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and other major kaiju films like Rodan and Mothra. I bet he would have appeared in even more Godzilla films after the series restarted in the 80s had he not passed away at the age of 56 in 1984. I am going to miss him. Whenever I saw his name in the opening credits, I felt assured of a familiar face and a solid performance, no matter how small the part. Most of the characters he played added a certain gravity to the movie, even when things were pretty silly otherwise. His best roles, those that gave him an opportunity to be authoritative and wise and compelling, being his first and his last. Since Akihiko Hirata played a prominent part in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, I wondered if he'd be playing the same character here, but he isn't. In fact, he's so heavily made up for this role that I almost didn't recognize him as Dr. Mifune, the elderly, slightly mad scientist who wants to get back at the men who fired him and ruined his reputation because they didn't believe in his discovery of Titanosaurus. Dr. Mifune chooses to work with the aliens because he's indebted to them, and because through them he can get his long-awaited revenge. But they do push the limits. He doesn't want to kill people, he just wants to show them he was right, and when his precious daughter's safety becomes a risk, he's faced with a conflict. Mifune walks the line between protagonist and antagonist, and as I watched the movie I found myself wondering, could he be redeemed by some sacrificial act? And what about Katsura? What kind of autonomy does she have? Is she good? Is she bad? Does she have any choice? I don't recall such complex questions cropping up in any previous Godzilla movies, so obviously it's not just about who Godzilla's gonna fight this time. Speaking of Godzilla, he gets comparatively minimal screen time in this one, but I love the drama of his cinematic entrance and this final artsy sepia shot of him. I can't say I'm super impressed with Titanosaurus, though. When I first caught sight of him, I thought he was a giant mermaid. Then when he comes on land, he looks more like a misshapen, overgrown seahorse with arms and legs, and I don't really get what he does. Seems like he just rushes at things, attacking them with brute force and flailing arms. Oh, and wind. He generates wind with his tail fin. I also think it's funny that when all the Interpol agents are listening to the recording from a boat that Titanosaurus attacked, and they hear a voice say, "It's a dinosaur," they're all like, "A dinosaur? What? No, how can this be?" But they've been dealing with dinosaurs and more extreme stuff for a long time now. Aren't they old hat at this point? Shouldn't they be like, "A dinosaur? Another dinosaur? Are you serious?" What I do like is the contrast between Titanosaurus and Mechagodzilla. Titanosaurus is kind of a sloppy fighter, he's the big ugly jerk, but Mechagodzilla has cold menace. This is another spot where I really felt the influence of Ishiro Honda's direction. Fukuda's Mechagodzilla seemed a little slicker and shinier, but Honda's Mechagodzilla projects intimidation as he stands by, silently biding his time until it's necessary for him to take on Godzilla. I find it pretty impossible to say that one movie is better than the other since their tones are so dissimilar. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is so much fun, Terror of Mechagodzilla is pretty serious. Not that it's without its sillier moments, like these hilarious alien helmets or the bizarre lip-lock fight move Titanosaurus puts on Godzilla. And here's a weird thing. Goro Matsumi, who plays the leader of the aliens from the Black Hole Third Planet, also played the leader of the aliens in the previous movie. Different character, but practically the same outfit and same position, same behavior. So much is the same. Were they trying to be confusing? Both of them are very solid entries in the Godzilla franchise, so if I could go for a compromise where everybody wins, Terror of Mechagodzilla might be the superior film. but I enjoyed Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla a little more. Like 1968's Destroy All Monsters had been, this movie was considered an ending for the Godzilla series, and for a while it was, until just 9 years later, a hard reboot came along in the shape of Return of Godzilla, or Godzilla 1985. I am super excited to watch that one. Like these two Mechagodzilla films, I've been looking forward to seeing Godzilla 1985 since I started this review series, so I hope you'll stay tuned for that review, which, if all things go according to plan, should be coming in the middle of December. Meanwhile, I hope that you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye!